SBPC, who if you've been watching for a while, you might remember is the player behind the underused Discord server we talked about a while ago, talked to me recently about a philosophy for making callouts that I think highlights a few useful aspects of callouts that are common mistakes. He calls it hyper-calming. The major characteristics are that when there's an engagement, you're repeatedly calling out a location, which presumably is where the fight is happening, until that location isn't relevant anymore. In between fights, you may hear more complex ideas being shared as the team plans to go back in, but as soon as the fight starts, it's back to repetition of the location and urgency. This resolves a few mistakes that players tend to make on callouts. Firstly, it prevents people from sacrificing speed and efficiency to give unnecessary context. All someone really needs to know in a fight is a location. Anything else about how to take that fight shouldn't be necessary, because it should either be intuitive because your teammate is a competitive Splatoon player and knows how to use their weapon in an engagement, or it should be something that you talk about in practice beforehand, before it's time to actually execute on the plan. This way, everyone knows where to look and can figure out what to do in just 2 syllables or less. And you're stuck with just those 2 syllables because you need to be repeating them so much. Another major advantage is that because you're basically jamming yourself from saying anything unrelated to the game by having to repeat yourself, you don't get someone cluttering the comms by complaining or apologizing or whatever else regarding how the engagement went. Nobody wants to hear an apology at that moment, just, at most, I'm down. And on top of taking up the airwaves at a time where the team could be communicating something useful, it can also bring down morale for the player getting down on themselves and whoever is listening. Making it so everyone has a stream of consciousness going on comms can maybe encourage some normally quiet members of the team to get more involved. This approach will definitely lead to people talking over each other sometimes, so to be heard, you need to match their energy. I found myself raising my voice more than I usually do on my own team, to the point where I was worried about bothering my neighbors a little. I'm a little skeptical that it's going to get someone who's normally just totally silent to all of a sudden feel comfortable with the skill of figuring out what location they're fighting in while they try to take the fight and figuring out how to form the words for it while fighting. But anything that makes it any easier for them is worth a try. Provided you don't have a technical or medical issue, it's definitely preferred that every single person have an active voice on comms in competitive play. Finally, a lot of players, myself included, have a bad habit of making callouts that require extra steps to understand. If I say that an enemy player is on me, my teammates have to take a step to figure out where I am before they'll know how to respond to that, and that costs valuable time. If you instead just call the location you're in, and calling a location is understood to mean that you want everyone to push that location, you'll get help a lot faster. I can see some potential downsides to the approach depending on how it's implemented. I watched SBPC and some of their friends play and joined them for some games, and I noticed that we were sometimes a bit too quick to rush into engagements. It felt like less special coordination was going on than usual too. It also seems like something that, especially for newer teams who aren't really used to that sense of urgency in comms, that it might be a little overwhelming, that it might trigger nerves in some players because they feel like they're kind of being yelled at. That's something that I think, by top level, a lot of players have generally gotten over and feel a lot more comfortable with, and I think that's less of a problem the more experienced you are, but that's also something to keep in mind. Still, if your team has any of these issues, which, in my experience, almost everyone does at first, I think it could be a useful drill, at the very least to try in practice, to force yourself and your teammates to break those habits, as long as everyone stays disciplined and keeps each other accountable about actually following the rules. Try it out next chance you get to play in a coordinated setting, and let me know how it works for you. I might try experimenting with it in coaching sessions and seeing what I think of the results myself.